I expect a lot of people to disagree with me, but we need a DPS meter in Guild Wars 2, if only in raids. Over the past few weeks, a new third-party group DPS meter was released, and it has spread through the community like wildfire. I will preface this by saying it is a memory reading program and completely against the Guild Wars 2 terms of service, and using it could result in having your account banned. I will refrain from naming it or linking to it here, but suffice to say most people in the raid community know what I'm talking about. The information a very simple group DPS meter provides is invaluable. Being able to see which group members are pulling their weight or not is crucial to actually solving your group's issues. Did you wipe because one half of your Ellies are pulling 33% less DPS than the other half? Without a DPS meter, you'd never know. You could get the feeling that something was off with your DPS, but you'd never be able to actually solve the problem. A DPS meter takes what would be an insurmountable issue and makes it quite plain. Failing to do a Gorseval updraft with your group? Now you'll have an idea why. The benefits are pretty obvious, but there's a few things most people don't consider. First, I think most people that are against the DPS meter are against it because they think it will lead to exclusion and elitism in pug groups. I'm sorry to break the news to you guys who've been living under a rock, but elitism and exclusion already exist in pugs today without a DPS meter. Right now, as we speak, somewhere, some poor Scepter Guardian who is making 17k DPS is being kicked from a Gorseval pug because their DPS is bad and he is being blamed, rather than the full, rare Valkyrie gear Elementalist who is only making 12k DPS. Essentially, the skilled Guardian is being unfairly victimized due to the collective ignorance of the group. There are two types of elitism, and this is an example of delusional or ignorance-based elitism. This is the kind of elitism that I feel has no place in a game like this. It's one thing if a guy is kicked from a group because he fails every mechanic over and over and legitimately has bad DPS. It's quite another for a good or even average player to be kicked because the group he is in thinks he's the problem when he isn't due to some prejudice. The fact that elitism will always exist and players will always be able to find ways to discriminate or consciously try to improve their group, but it's a much better outcome if the exclusionary behavior is based on some factual reality and not ignorance. Sure, facts and information can be abused and used for bad purposes, but facts and information are also a source of great good, and ignorance can never be the source of anything good. The second benefit is effort. Players tend to get lazy. Players will react and put in lower effort if they can get away with it. Knowing that they are being monitored goes a long way towards improving their effort level. Oftentimes, you will find that the quote-unquote bad players aren't actually bad, they're just not putting in a lot of effort. They're off watching Netflix, they're doing something else, they're chatting with someone. However, once they're being watched, so to speak, they play just as good as your best players. No one wants to be on the bottom of the DPS list, and sure, it's a bit of a crabs in a barrel situation since someone has to be at the bottom, but this is a good sort of competitive spirit that will give a group higher overall effort and corresponding results. Lastly, and this is anecdotal, in a raid, DPS meter makes players better players. It makes groups better groups and makes the community a better community. The DPS golem can only go so far in these regards. The information it gives is helpful for determining base benchmarks in a perfect environment. It doesn't tell you much about how different builds play out in actual high-pressure fights. It doesn't tell you how individual players respond during actual boss fights. It doesn't necessarily inform you how individual builds coalesce to create group synergy. At best, the DPS golem benchmarks give you a good place to start in determining what is ideal and what is optimal for a given group or specific situation. But only with an actual DPS meter will you be able to know for sure. You can never be the best player or the best group you can be without a DPS meter. I'm sure I will get a bit of negativity from this next comment, but it's quite sad that the most basic tool in a raiding community is denied to the raid community because it would be taken poorly by the player base at large, the non-raid community, even though most of them will never set foot in a raid in order to be affected by it. According to morons on the official forum, their theory is that the existence of raids in a game drove people away from Guild Wars 2 in huge numbers. Personally, I don't understand why the existence of content you don't like would drive you away, That's like throwing out your television set because you don't like one particular channel. I suspect this same cast of delusional players would cite the introduction of a DPS meter in raids as reason for players fleeing the game in even greater numbers, even though it's pretty obvious that any player who would quit over a DPS meter wasn't going to be a raider anyway and wouldn't be impacted by that at all. Lastly, I'm going to sum it up by saying a DPS meter in a raid is a force for good. It's a basic learning and accountability tool. It's a tool that will eliminate delusions, lower ignorant prejudices, and punish liars. Asking for an in-game DPS meter, which players on the alpha test servers already have access to, is not asking for the world. It's an extremely basic request with no rational opposition. The saddest part of our current situation as players in Guild Wars 2 is that the players are forced to use third-party memory reading programs while risking their accounts in order to obtain information that shouldn't be a secret whatsoever. The community is ready for it. Most organized groups are already using a third-party DPS meter. Many pugs are already using a third-party memory reading DPS meter. The only thing that would really be changed is the risk to the players' accounts for having information which they should have anyway being eliminated, and the benefit to the community would be immense. Please leave your thoughts about this video below, and thank you guys for watching.